let's get this out of the way right off the bat. There are no rules when it comes to screenwriting, and yet there are things you can do wrong. I know, sounds confusing, right? Chances are, though, if you've ever had the thought of, can I do blank in my screenplay, then you're thinking about screenwriting all wrong. Now, yes, if you're a beginning screenwriter, it can be helpful to think about things in terms of right and wrong, because that does help you learn a little bit faster at the beginning. But if you're moving up in the skill set of screenwriting and moving into what I would call an intermediate screenwriter, and if you're still thinking about things as right or wrong or wondering if you can do X, Y, Z, okay, you're going to have a hard time becoming an intermediate or even later an advanced or master screenwriter. So let's fix how you're thinking about screenwriting. I'm going to use a metaphor for a moment. This is Kurt. Kurt loves the outdoors and hiking and camping and all of that, and Kurt heads out into the woods. And Kurt is out enjoying nature, and it starts to get dark. And Kurt decides he needs to build some kind of shelter for the night because it looks like it might rain, and Kurt wants to stay warm and dry. Now, I ask you, are there rules for building a shelter in the woods? I mean, does Kurt need to follow some set of rules or whatever that either his dad taught him or he learned from Bear Grylls or from watching some YouTube video? Nope. Kurt can build the shelter however he wants to build it. It's his shelter. He's by himself. Who cares what it looks like? So Kurt finds a field that has a lot of tall grass, and he uses his knife and harvests a lot of it, wraps it in bundles with some twine he has in his backpack, and then he just starts stacking up the grass to make an enclosure. Now, is this a shelter? Well, technically, yeah, sure, it's a shelter, but is it going to keep him warm and dry? Well, warm, maybe. Okay, dry, maybe, but if the wind starts blowing, there is no way, right? It's just going to blow over, and then Kurt's going to be both cold and wet. So instead, what if Kurt builds some kind of hut composed of sticks? I mean, there's lots of sticks in the forest, in the woods. He can tie some of them together. Is this a shelter? Well, again, technically, sure, it's a shelter, but is it going to keep him warm and dry? Well, maybe. It probably will do a better job of keeping him dry than the hut of only grass, but it's still not probably good enough. Too much wind, it's game over, and that's if the sticks are layered properly to keep him dry in the first place. Is any of this story sounding familiar to you? Now, Kurt isn't going to build a hut out of bricks in the middle of the woods, but there are lots of ways to build a shelter that will keep him warm and dry, even if the wolf comes to huff and puff and blow his house down. So my question is, are there rules that Kurt must follow in building his shelter? Well, no, there's no rules, but there are principles to consider when building a shelter, and those principles are guided by the end result that Kurt wants. So if Kurt wants a shelter that will keep the bugs and critters off of him, okay, that's a shelter that's going to look very different than a shelter meant to keep him warm and dry. So the end result, the result that Kurt wants, dictates what he needs to be doing as he builds his shelter. And hopefully you're extrapolating with me here, because the type of script you want to end up with requires certain things within the script to make that result the end result. Okay, there are principles that must guide you in the writing of your script. Some of those principles include having a solid story, and if you want to learn more about story and story structure, be sure to grab my book. It's linked below. But as you write your script, if you don't have a story, I'm sorry, you don't have jack. It doesn't matter what else you do. So you've got to make sure that that part is working. And again, there are no rules, but there are things that every story requires to get the end result that you're looking for. And then you also have to tell that story well, which means you have to bring to bear the tools of storytelling in effective ways. And there are a lot of tools, but no matter how many tools are in your toolbox, storytelling tools, whatever's in there, you will never use every tool in your toolbox every time. You will only use the tools that you need to get the result that you're after. Now, on this channel, I talk about some of those tools. If you want the crash course on tools, join the fast track. That is also linked below. And in the fast track, I get into most of them. But if you want to be a successful screenwriter, you have to get as many tools as you can into your toolbox, and you have to know how to use them effectively. Again, you won't use every tool for every script. Some scripts require these, some scripts require those, but you do have to know which tool to bring to bear. And if there were rules of screenwriting, then you would have to use the same tools over and over and over and over and over again in the exact same way. If there were rules of screenwriting, then specific story moments should happen on page 11 or 17 or 49 or whatever. Writing a screenplay is not a recipe you follow. If you were baking a cake, your job is to be proficient enough with all the tools available to you in the kitchen to be able to bake the cake that you're wanting to bake. But this also means you have to use the tools in the way that they were intended. So you use a hammer to hammer things, not to screw things in. That task requires a different tool, and you know that when it comes to hammers and screwdrivers. But do you know when you should be using the tool of plant and payoff instead of the tool of dramatic irony? Okay, that's part of it, knowing which tool to use when. But format is also a tool. It's a storytelling tool. The format of a screenplay helps you tell the story you're trying to tell in the way you're trying to tell it, so the audience, the reader, knows how to interpret the story you're trying to tell. So do you know how to properly format slug lines and dialogue? Can you clearly format a phone conversation between two characters in a way that a reader can understand? Not because there's a right or wrong way, but because there is a way to do it that gets the end result you are after. So stop thinking about whether whatever you're trying to do is right or wrong. Instead, be thinking about, what's the result that I want the audience to feel right here? And then write the script to get that emotional response. This is the only way to create a story well told. And perhaps for you personally, you have a result that you want as an aspiring screenwriter. You know you like screenwriting. You know that you're over here, right? Somewhere in the beginner intermediate stage. And you want to be over there into the advanced mastery stage. But to do that, you need two things. You need to learn the tools and you need to hone your process. Now, if you want to learn the tools, get my book, okay? Get on the fast track. If you want to hone your process, consider joining the Navigator, which is my coaching program. You can book a free call with me and apply, and we'll talk about you, where you're at in the craft, and see if you're a good fit for the Navigator. Okay, this is not a call to talk about your latest script or to help you with the script problem. If you want my help with that, I do script consultation. That's a link below as well. But the Navigator call is to talk about joining the Navigator. And I'd love to talk with you if you know you want to progress in honing the process of writing a script. We talk about everything in the Navigator, from idea generation to drafting to revising to marketing your script. And if you're in the Navigator, you also get access to the fast track, so it's a win-win for you. But you have to book a call to apply. There is a link below for that. If you just want to learn about a storytelling tool, watch this. Don't forget about fun buttons and other links below that might be helpful to you. And when you tell a story, follow the principles to get the result you want and tell a story that matters. See you later.